What if the story everyone is fighting over is only the most recent chapter of something far, far older? Two names, one land, a conflict the entire world has watched for generations. But beneath the headlines, beneath the borders, beneath every claim and counterclaim, something ancient is waiting. Something that predates every religion, every nation, and every map that has ever been drawn of this land. Welcome to Ancestor Origins. Today, we are not going into the politics. We are not taking sides. We are going somewhere most documentaries never go. We are going into the ground. The land stretching between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea is one of the most studied places on Earth. Scholars, historians, archaeologists, and theologians have written more about this region than almost anywhere else in human history. And yet, the deeper story, the oldest story, the story that goes back 10,000 years and beyond, is one that almost nobody talks about. Because this land is not simply the birthplace of three world religions, it is one of the oldest continuously inhabited places on this entire planet. Long before any scripture was written, long before any kingdom rose or fell, long before any people gave this land a name, human beings were already here. They were building here, farming here, burying their dead in this same soil. And the evidence they left behind is extraordinary. To understand the true age of this land, we have to go back, far back, further than most history books are willing to go. This narrow strip of territory sits at one of the most remarkable geographic positions on Earth, the meeting point of three continents: Africa to the southwest, Asia to the east, Europe to the northwest. For hundreds of thousands of years, this land was not a destination. It was a corridor, a pathway, one of the earliest and most important routes that ancient human beings walked as they migrated out of Africa and began spreading across the world. Archaeological evidence confirms that human activity in this region stretches back more than 100,000 years. Stone tools, ancient bones, and the remains of early campsites have been buried beneath layers of earth across the entire region. Long before any civilization, any religion, or any recorded history, people were moving through this land, stopping here, surviving here, and eventually settling here. And then, something remarkable happened. Around 10,000 years ago, in one of the most important turning points in all of human history, something changed in this region. People stopped moving. They put down roots. They began to farm. The Neolithic revolution, the transition from nomadic hunter-gatherer life to settled agricultural civilization, is one of the defining moments of human existence. And archaeological evidence suggests that some of the earliest expressions of this revolution happened right here in the land the world knows today as Israel and Palestine. There is a city in this region that most people have heard of, but few truly understand. Its name is Jericho, and what archaeology has revealed about Jericho is nothing short of astonishing. Evidence suggests that people have been living continuously in Jericho for more than 10,000 years. Let that number settle for a moment. 10,000 years of continuous human inhabitation. That means people were building homes in Jericho, storing grain in Jericho, organizing their communities in Jericho, before the pyramids of Egypt were even imagined, before ancient Greece existed, before Rome was a dream, before almost every civilization that fills the pages of our history textbooks. When archaeologists dig into the ground at Jericho, they find layers, dozens of them. Each layer is a different era, a different culture, a different chapter of human life built directly on top of the ruins of the one that came before. Ancient walls, storage pits, the foundations of structures that were already old when most of the ancient world was still young. Jericho may be the oldest continuously inhabited city on Earth, and it sits in the middle of the most contested land in the modern world. But the story does not begin with Jericho. It begins even earlier, with a people whose name most people have never heard. They are called the Natufians. The Natufian people lived in this region approximately 15,000 years ago. They were not yet farmers in the full sense, they were not yet city builders, but they were something extraordinary. They were on the very threshold between the ancient world and the world that would eventually become ours. The Natufians built semi-permanent structures. They gathered wild grain and ground it into food. They developed tools of increasing sophistication, and perhaps most remarkably, they buried their dead with care, with ceremony, with objects placed beside them that suggest a belief in something beyond this life. These were not primitive wanderers. These were thoughtful, organized, spiritually aware human beings who called this land home thousands of years before any of the great civilizations of the ancient world were born. After the Natufians came the Canaanites, and this is where the history of this land becomes both fascinating and deeply complicated. The Canaanites are a people most often encountered in biblical texts, usually as a people to be conquered, displaced, or erased. But archaeology tells a very different story about who the Canaanites actually were. They were a Bronze Age civilization of remarkable sophistication. Their cities stretched across the entire Levant, the region that today encompasses Israel, Palestine, Lebanon, Jordan, and parts of Syria. They were traders who built commercial networks connecting this land to ancient Egypt, ancient Mesopotamia, and the wider Mediterranean world. They were artists who produced carved ivory, painted pottery, and bronze metalwork of extraordinary quality. They developed systems of writing that some researchers believe influenced the alphabets that eventually gave rise to most of the written languages used in the world today. The Canaanites were not a footnote, they were a foundational civilization, and for thousands of years, they were the dominant culture of this entire region. Archaeological excavations across modern Israel and Palestine have uncovered Canaanite city ruins, temples, burial sites, household objects, and administrative records that paint a picture of complex urban life that was already ancient when the first biblical stories were being told. And then there were the Philistines. History, particularly the biblical tradition, has not been kind to the Philistines. They are portrayed as the enemies of civilization, as crude and violent people who stood in opposition to everything good and righteous. But once again, archaeology tells a more nuanced and more interesting story. The Philistines were sophisticated, their cities were organized and well constructed, their pottery was distinctive and skillfully made. Archaeological evidence from their urban centers reveals a people with a rich cultural life, complex religious practices, and wide trade connections across the Mediterranean world. Some researchers believe the Philistines were migrants from the Aegean region, from the world of early Greece and the broader Mediterranean, who arrived in this land and built something remarkable before they too faded from the historical record. And this brings us to the question that sits at the heart of everything we have been discussing. A question that most documentaries about this land never ask. What happened to all these people? The Natufians, the Canaanites, the Philistines, the dozens of other cultures and communities that lived in this land across 10,000 years of continuous human habitation. Where did they go? The honest answer, based on what archaeological and genetic research currently suggests, is that they did not simply disappear. They were not wiped cleanly from the face of the earth. They were absorbed. They mixed with the peoples who came after them. Their descendants continued to live in this land, under different names, different religions, different identities, but carrying within their blood and their bones the inheritance of all those ancient generations. Studies of ancient DNA from archaeological remains across this region have produced findings that challenge many of the assumptions people hold about the origins of the modern populations here. The genetic picture is layered and complex, just like the archaeological layers beneath the ground. And it suggests that the people who live in this land today, on all sides of all its borders, may share far ancient ancestry than the modern conflict would ever suggest. There is one more thing that must be said, and it is perhaps the most thought-provoking of all. Researchers believe that the vast majority of ancient sites in this region remain either unexcavated or only partially explored. Beneath the streets of Jerusalem, ancient layers reach down thousands of years, most of them untouched. Beneath modern neighborhoods in Gaza and across the West Bank, ancient city ruins sit in the earth, unreached and unstudied. Political conflict, restricted access, limited resources, and the sheer density of modern construction above ancient sites have all conspired to keep enormous portions of this region's history locked beneath the surface. What might still be buried there? What ancient texts have never been read? What cities have never been named? What discoveries are waiting that could change not just our understanding of this land, but our understanding of human civilization itself? Nobody knows, and that uncertainty is not a failure of archaeology, it is an invitation. The conflict above the ground gets all the attention. The borders, the negotiations, the violence, the pain, all of it is real, all of it matters. But the story beneath the ground is older than any of it, older than every claim, older than every name this land has ever been given. Before there was Israel, before there was Palestine, before there were empires, religions, or flags of any kind, there were people, ancient people who farmed this soil 10,000 years ago, who raised their children here, who buried their elders here, who looked up at the same sky that people look up at today and wondered about the same things we still wonder about. Their story is not finished, it is buried, patient and silent, waiting beneath the ground for the day when the world is finally ready to listen. Maybe the 10,000-year-old secret of the Holy Land is not a secret about war or religion or ownership. Maybe it is a secret about how deeply, how ancient, and how completely all of us are connected. If this documentary made you think, please subscribe to Ancestor Origins. Every week, we go beneath the surface of history to find the stories the world forgot. The past is deeper than you think.